So, my name is Abigail, and my final presentation for the semester is the negative and harmful effects of a poor diet on health. The research question that I chose was, how exactly does a primarily poor diet lead to increased stress and illness in young adults? I said young adults, but in reality I really mean anyone. I just chose to focus on young adults because I am a young adult, and I've noticed a change in my mental and physical state since beginning college. Not eating home cooked meals, eating a lot of processed takeout foods, stuff like that. So I kind of wanted to delve into what causes stress and illness, and does it have anything to do with what you're eating. The categories I broke up my paper into were availability of fresh foods and the correlation between accessibility and obesity rates, the presence of BPA in food packaging, nutrient intake, and a term called resilience, which I'll mention a little bit later. So the prior research included the National Food Survey, which was a survey that measured food purchasing data, consumption, and expenditure around different parts of the globe. It was conducted from 1940 to 2000. BPA, bisphenol A, is a component of food packaging that was first discovered in 1891. In 1997, we saw the first signs of adverse effects: endocrine disruption, hormone issues, weight gain, etc. The term resilience was coined in 1996, and this term is essentially how your body heals itself and recovers from illnesses and injuries. So the purpose of my research paper was to further my understanding of how diet affects health. Despite all the health foods and forms of exercise out there, why is the obesity epidemic still a thing? So basically, we all know that food affects your health, but I just chose this topic to really get a deeper understanding of why and how it affects you. So the findings I discovered in one of my studies, I read in the first study by Jewell and Hemmingson, it was discovered that the amount of processed and ready-to-consume foods were purchased considerably more than before. This led to a parallel rise of overweight and obesity data among adults. There were 3 separate studies that I researched. One took place in Brazil, one took place in Canada, and the third took place in Switzerland. And all 3 countries saw an increase in obesity as well as diabetes, heart problems, cardiovascular problems. They also saw that there was an increase in the amount of processed and ready-to-consume foods or fast foods that were purchased in these countries. Another thing I discovered was that low costs of things like oil, butter, and so-called fatty and salty foods led to more consumption of ready-made and processed foods. Granted, the cheaper the food, the more likely somebody is to buy it. We all want to save money somewhere. Another thing that played a role in obesity and the consumption of fast foods, processed foods, was aggressive marketing towards children. You watch TV these days and you see all these commercials for fast food places. And granted, people are going to try and go there and eat those foods, Although these places a lot of times are targeted towards children, anyone who wants to can go there. And for convenience sake, people will go there. The other thing I noticed was, the other thing I learned was that BPA, bisphenol A, it stopped your endocrine function, and it affected your hormone and weight balance. So an increase in BPA led to your body not producing the right amount of endocrines that it needs, and also either producing too much or too little hormones, as well as increasing weight. Another thing I found in relation to resiliomics was that omega fatty acids and high glycemic foods lead to inflammation. I didn't quite delve into exactly how these lead to inflammation, but I know the sources that I used kind of did talk about it a little bit. Another thing was that these foods led to hyperglycemia and hyperinsulinemia, which are two things that could potentially cause diabetes in children and adults. So that was kind of something interesting. Implications. The findings that I discovered and researched could be used by people in dietetics and nutrition. These findings can help them come up with better ways to help their clients. If you know a food is a high glycemic index food, then as a nutritionist you could maybe suggest an alternate option that's lower on the glycemic index scale for your patient, or for your client, especially if he or she displays symptoms of hyperglycemia or hyperinsulinemia, and vice versa. If they display hypoglycemia and hypoinsulinemia, then using these findings you can kind of help them discover what they can eat to fix those conditions. Another group that could use the findings are packaging manufacturers. BPA is found in a lot of plastics, and it is a toxin, so the more of it you ingest, the more likely you are to get sick, which could actually be a potential cause of the obesity epidemic. So packaging manufacturers can use this information to to come up with alternative ways to provide food packaging. And last but not least, the medical field. Doctors, nurses, those who were first responders can use this information to help treat people with issues or diseases like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and other health issues. If somebody is showing signs of high blood pressure, a doctor can look at the foods that have a high amount of sodium, which a lot of processed and ready-to-consume foods do, and recommend foods that do not have sodium or have much lower contents of sodium. So my recommendations, the first one that I thought of off the top of my head was healthier fast food options. I mean, we live in a very busy society, so fast foods are convenient, and that's why a lot of people consume them. So the very base that we could start at is providing healthier options. Like the foods we eat today, the fast foods we eat, are filled with so many preservatives and ridiculously high amounts of sodium. Processed stuff. I mean, some people would argue that a lot of fast food isn't even real food. So, right off the top of my head, my recommendation is healthier fast food options, more natural foods, less preservatives, less colorants, less BPA, less stuff like that. The second recommendation was that or scientists or whoever can try and come up with alternate types of food packaging. I mean, as I said earlier, most, if not all, plastic contains BPA and phthalates, so we could use this information in this study to perhaps think of more organic options. Is canning better than plastic? Is styrofoam better than plastic? and stuff like that. And last but not least, adding more nutrients to processed foods. Obviously, we can't completely eliminate ready-to-consume processed foods, TV dinners, stuff like that. So if we can't completely eliminate them, then what we could do is add more nutrients and vitamins and minerals to those foods in hopes that if you have to consume them, you're still getting the recommended amount of nutrients that you need to maintain a healthy body. And that is my presentation. I hope you guys can use this information and, think about the foods you eat and how they may or may not affect your health.